How's the volume, okay? I don't know if that clock is right. I hit the bell at 8:15, but then my watch says it's 8:15 now. Anybody? I'm not we're in the Avatamsaka, not that it really matters, but.
My thing was just 8:15 right now.
Right now, okay. I'm usually not on time, so just by mistake, I'm on time tonight. We're looking at the Avamtasaka Sutra, chapter 10, entitled The Bodhisattva, plural, ask for clarification. And so we finished up, there's 10 verses here. And let me see, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Yeah, so we were up to the middle last week. And the analogy is being given by Manjushri's asking clarification, and the awakened leader, Bodhisattva, is giving the responses. So it says enlightened leader, Bodhisattva answers. And basically Manjushri is asking some pretty deep questions, but he's saying basically if the mind and the nature is everywhere the same among all living beings, among all people, that all beings have essentially the same potential capacity, why do we see this manifold differences of karma and faculties and all the vicissitudes of life distributed so differently across the spectrum, not only historically, but right now. And the enlightened leader is asking and using analogies to explain this. And he says, I'll answer according to their nature. This means that the answers given in the text are not the only answers, and maybe not the answer, if you want to say the answer, if there's a the answer. I don't know that that's how the text comes at it. But the purpose of Dharma is not to give the answer, but to stimulate in the reader or the listener a liberating the mind response. So the answers are given. He says, I will now awaken the dull multitudes and answer according to their nature or their capacities. So this text is also answering to a certain capacity, presumably us, at different stages of our understanding and cultivation. So this is not to be read as the absolute same, but all the words, the teachings are expedients given to counteract a various confused idea or attachment that keeps us from seeing things as they really are. And so in this case, the analogies or the metaphors given is that all Dharma, all phenomena have no function or substance. Thus, every one of them knows not all the others. So it's describing the way things work and the way we understand they work seems to be going along, but not necessarily interconnected or intercaused exactly. And then he gives this example with water in a river, which forms torrents and rapids. They're mutually unaware, so does with all phenomena, all dharmas. Tremendous blaze, he gives the example of fire, so it is with all dharmas. And goes to the wind, and the wind moves along, but the wind before and the wind that comes after just come and go. They're not aware of each other. And then like the planets in the solar system. So it goes through here five comparisons. And then he says, so too is it with all dharmas. Oh, sorry. Okay. We are looking at page 6 now in my text. Page 6. Sorry, I moved right along assuming everybody was continuing from last week. We have that place now? Page 6? Okay. My apologies. And then we'll just do a little of the Chinese here where we start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the fifth one, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue. So it's yan er bi shi shen, xin yi zhu qing gen, yi qi chang liu zhuan, er wu neng chuan zhe. And so it says the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the body, the thinking mind, and the sensory organs all turn and constantly and flow in samsara, and yet there is no one making them turn. So this is basically an Avatamsaka way of coming at a central teaching or principle of Buddhism, which is the idea of impermanence and not self. Everything is in flux, everything is changing, and it's changing constantly. There's nothing that we experience, there's nothing in our experience that isn't changing. This is a given. And so this can be, on one hand, very unsettling because it's hard to find solidity and stability for permanency, and yet there's nothing in the universe and our experience that confirms that. So you can look at the macro, looking up at the stars in the heavens. I guess there's a meteor shower coming more. Anybody know about the meteor showers? Yeah, well, there's a big one coming, so you can go out and watch Impermanence on the macro level. Or you can just comb your hair in the morning and watch it on the micro level as your hair comes out of your head. Or you can see it on your scans or your wrinkles on your skin. Climbing the stairs. The stairs seem to be getting steeper. And I'm getting more out of breath when I climb them. Impermanence. The stairs haven't changed. I'm changing, but the stairs are also changing because they're on top of California with an earthquake and they're cracking. So everything is impermanent. This is the idea. But anatta is the teaching of non-self, and it means there's no self-existing thing. Everything is conditioned and co-conditioned. So things exist in a network of conditions mutually supported. It's called Dasher Yin Yang, the causes and conditions. The great matter, causes and conditions. So this means things exist, but they exist in a flux and change with all other things. So there's a fabric of constant change and interaction going on, but none of these things are self-existing. And we are in a state, just to go down to the micro level again, we exist in the flux of change, of constant changing conditions. Right now we breathe in, we breathe out. The heart is pumping blood. The brain is sending neural messages and so forth. This is immense. If you could listen inside, and then people have done that, I guess, you can get microphones to go through. Yeah, get microphones to go in your veins and your. It sounds kind of gross, but that, I mean, it's not Matrix. But you get them to go in, and you listen to it, and you hear it. It's just like at the ocean. There's just this sound of swirls of constant activity. Even where we're sitting still here, in quietness, if you could really hear the inside, it would just be like New York City at rush hour, inside the body. And so at that micro level, and none of these things are self-existing. They relate to each other. Inhale, exhale, oxygen, CO2, blah, blah, blah. This is going on all the time. And even in this room, we're constantly shifting and changing molecules and atoms and so forth with each other, with the larger world. And so all of the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, are on a constant flux and interchange, and there's no stopping, and there's no permanent self or single thing that just exists unto itself, but is in constant change and relationship. And this is presented as we seem to come into being, we prosper and thrive for a while, there's a decline, and then we fade. But we fade and disappear. We don't disappear completely. We transform into different forms of matter and energy and so forth. So this is what's being described here, and that's what it says. And so too it is with all dharmas. Now the sixth passage here goes into eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, and the thinking mind. This is a technical reference. Anybody know what that reference point is for these? How many are there? Count them up. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, thinking mind. 6. So here we get the list of the 6 sense organs or sense faculties. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. Basically, Buddhism looks at the human being as a, let's say, a physical, mental, or a mind-body conglomerate. And these are called the five skandhas, or the five heaps. There's form, which is the physical, and the other four of these are related to mental functions. Feelings, cognitions, samskara, which is transformations and patterns, and then finally consciousness. So you have one mind and four mind, one body, and they look at it analytically that way. So they say everything is in flux, everything is changing. What is the analytical scan that you can do to see that? And they say, it's matter, and then these four elements of mind or consciousness. The Chan school is really wonderful. The Chan school tends to bring language down to something to say, well, you have Rupa, Vedana, and so forth, and you have all. Chan school says, no, it's just a heap of snot and a puff of wind. The meaning form is the heap of snot, and the puff of wind is the mentally. And so it even further deconstructs it down to there's nothing permanent or stable there. So the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the thinking mind. And then it says the sensory organs, these are called the sense faculties of the sensory organs. They constantly turn and flow in samsara, meaning they go on in birth and death, rebirth, birth and death, and rebirth. But there's no one making them turn. So there's different ways to talk about this, but it's saying these elements that we think are a me and a mind, which are just constantly changing elements. The form is changing and the mental construct are always, our mind and bodies are changing. We reify this in our imaginations and try to make it into a permanent me or mind. But it's just hopeless. I mean, you can try, but it doesn't work. It's going to evaporate and fade and fall apart. So when it says they turn in samsara, it means they come together, they come apart. Just like you have spring, summer, winter and fall, you have birth, maturity, aging, and death. And there's a corresponding, again, macro and micro here. This is the way of things. And so samsara means they go, they come, they go, and they come. But who's in charge of that? And the text says there's no one making them do this. This could be seen, I'll read a commentary by Master Hua. They're constantly being turned by states of existence. Why is that? Because they are organs of feeling. If you could take control of these sense faculties or these organs, or you could intercept them, you could break into them, and you could not turn in this cycle. There's no way you become vexed or afflicted. Yet, there is nothing making them turn. He quotes the text again. There's nothing commanding your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body or mind to remain involved in the cycle of birth and death. Your sensory organs turn and flow, but there's nobody in control and nobody forcing them to do so. There's no outside force with the authority to control your six sense organs, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Each of these organs is unaware of all the others as they turn and flow in birth and death. So this is his commentary on this, so in the sense that he's not saying there's an outside agent that directs and controls this, who determines this. Then you say, well, maybe there's the inside agent, which is me. But then you get into the deeper sense of not self. And that means not only there's no external agent, there's also no internal, permanent, unchanging self, or a me or mine, also directing this. So they just go on seemingly at random, almost in chaos. But what the text is saying, they are directed by karma, by intentional action. These things move along. And so in order to change them or get handle on them, you have to begin by working into what you do with body, speech, and mind intentionally. And change the determining factor of this is karma. And so this idea of a permanent self behind that is actually a construction. The Yogacara texts call it fabrications. My little nephew has this video he wrote just called Builder Bob. Builder Bob. And this guy's always constructing, he's got a hammer, so he builds things. And the Buddha says we're all builder bobs. You know, we're ego-making devices. We make this I, we attach to it, we think it's permanent and real. We do everything we can to make it like the Taj Mahal, and it's going to last forever. And nonetheless, it just crumbles and fades and goes away. Seeing this directly, that all conditioned dharmas are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, including this me and mine, this permanent me and mine. Seen in that way is called awakening. And that is something that can happen through self-cultivation, through the training of your mind and body, and getting a handle on the sense organs and the faculties and so forth. And that awakening, and when it happens, people just go, oh my gosh, wow. The other time it happens is when you die. And when you die, it also just breaks up and you go, wow. But the difference is if you awaken, you can actually have some measure of control over it and work it and change your destiny. When it happens at the point of death, you've left the controlling mechanism. You're no longer able to direct it. So it's just a thought. When I talked about this last week, because I say things and then some of you might wonder, yeah, he just said that off the top of his head. Where did that come from? I said that the idea of a no permanent, enduring self in control of everything is not only a Buddhist concept, but it's also scientific. And then I just let it go. So maybe someone's thinking, yeah, it's not scientific. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of this. A few years ago, I was asked to contribute an article on this discussion between Buddhism and modern science. And so I kind of looked into it. Admittedly, I'm an amateur, okay? I'm not a STEM person by inclination or training. But for me, even though I was brought up in the humanities mostly as my background, STEM is becoming, you know what I mean by STEM? Everybody okay? Science, technology, engineering, math. That is becoming sort of the lingua franca of of common discourse right now. This is the arbiter of truth, increasingly, that if it's intersubjectively testable, it's empirically verifiable, and so on and so forth. This is what's true. And texts like these and the humanities texts and so forth are fancy, imaginary, not really worth looking into. And again, as this becomes a language now of modern discourse, trying to bring Buddhism into this modern discourse, I have to understand this language a little. Because if I just don't talk at all about science and technology, it's like I'm on another planet. On the other hand, if I get too close to it, like my teacher and also Martin Heidegger warned, I become inflamed by it. It takes me over. And it becomes my consciousness. And I start actually seeing things as a machine rather than a person. So, but I want to share with you, this is some of the notes I used for this article. And I'll just kind of read them for you. And if you get really bored or tired, just take a nap. If not, we'll just keep going. But one of the things in the article, one of the people in the article was saying, oh, modern science and Buddhism are really like totally the same. They're really interconnecting. And I said, I don't think so exactly. So I start this by saying, it would be tempting at this point to note the striking parallels between the Buddhist notion of consciousness and recent neuroscience discoveries. So I go into neuroscience a little bit, again, amateur. For example, quote, the theater of the mind model. There's a model in study of consciousness called the theater of the mind. Model of consciousness has been pretty thoroughly refuted. This conception places a me inside my mind like someone in a private theater, who from within one's head looks out at reality through the eyes. You get the image? So me, am inside this theater, my body, and I'm looking out at reality through my eyes. This multi-sensational theater, so I experience sights, sounds, smells, and emotions, as well as memories, dreams, and fantasies and reflections. They're conjured up as well are imagined sights, sounds, transports of imagination, seen as if on a mental screen by the inner eye or heard on the inner ear. So there's an inside and there's an outside. There's a me and there's an outside world. This is called the theater. All of this is in the context of my consciousness, and I am the one who is experiencing this. That I feel that I am somewhere inside my head, the observer looking out at the world outside or viewing an imaginary inner movie, like a director or a master script. All of this feels natural. This is the trickery thing here. When we fabricate in this way, we fabricate it in such a way as to it feels very natural. And so that anything that pushes against it, we dismiss immediately. This is a very clever defense mechanism. Anyhow, it feels natural, but does not stand up to scientific scrutiny. Thus, this notion is called Descartes' mythical theater. Now, you can follow up on some of it if you want to, but that's the word that Descartes, who separated the mind and the body. Anybody know his famous line? Anybody know Descartes? You've heard of him?
No, I mean.
Yeah.
I think therefore.
Yeah, he lives in Alabama. No, okay. What was his famous line?
Ergo cogito?
Cogito. Anybody? Huh? Cogito ergo sum. Yeah. With the Catholic tradition, I was forced to take Latin. Cogito, I think. Ergo, therefore, I am. This is what they call Descartes, and he said, so the mind and body are two distinct things. It's not because I feel I think, therefore I am. When I was thinking about this, isn't that funny? Sorry, the pun. Was thinking about this, I thought the Buddhist response might be, I think, therefore, I think I am. So it's a little different because the thinking makes me think I am, but it's actually the thinking that makes the me. It's not the me doing the thinking. There's the difference between the Buddhist thing. I had a Taoist version of this too, because you know now I'm digressing, but I'm having fun with you guys. You know the famous Zhuangzi passage where Zhuangzi is asleep and he's dreaming he's a butterfly. And he's going about flitting, doing all the things that butterflies do. And then he wakes up and he thought, is it Zhuangzi who was dreaming he was a butterfly, or the butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi? So my Taoist thing of this, I think, therefore, I am, or am I? Anyhow, I like to play with these things. So this is called the theater, Descartes' mystical theater. Let me go on with this a bit. So too, there's another common model for the mind called stream of consciousness metaphor. And this really begins with William James and is still very prevalent today. Here, our conscious life is likened to a continuously flowing stream of sights and smells, sensations, thoughts, emotions, joys, and sorrows, all of which happen to a me. So the stream of consciousness, all these things are flowing and they're happening to a me. The research increasing, the neuroscience research increasingly suggests something far less dualistic and ego-centered is at work in consciousness. What we see is not simply inner representations of an out there, but actually active creations of a mind in action. Active creations of a mind in action. Seen, attending to, and acting in the world all become the same thing. So what we observe and are acting in the world and what we attend to create a reality. Perception is basically not reliable, nor an accurate reflection of an external world, but mostly a mental fabrication based on inference and memory, filling in the gaps. We can see this in very practical ways in what people call change blindness or inattentional blindness. Do you know these expressions? They come from psychology. They'll have, we have patterns and we just put these patterns out. So they'll have something like, they'll show people playing with a ball or something, the ball's going back and forth. And then they'll actually have a man dressed up like a gorilla run through there. And When the people are watching and following the ball, they actually don't see the gorilla. So because they're focused on a certain pattern with inference and memory that this is going to happen next, they don't see that happening. So sleight of hand, tricks like this and magic, all based on this psychological glitch that we have called change blindness or inattentional blindness. Just two phenomena that are well documented. So what we see at any given moment is a subtle interaction of recall, projection, and mental manipulation. If we do not manipulate, we behold nothing. This is very interesting. These are based on experiments that are being done. If we stop manipulating, certain aspects of the world drop back into nothingness. Shift attention and reality shifts. Perception is in constant and unreliable combination, memory, projective, selective attention. Thus, our experience of the world is active, not passive. The world and the self, from this point of view, is a mutually interactive grand illusion. Now, I am not quoting Buddhist texts here. I'm actually quoting, well, what then was, this was 5 years ago, was sort of the edge of neuroscience. And mostly, we are not conscious of our consciousness. We spend the entire day unaware and unsure of what we are attending to, blocking out, perceiving, or influenced by. It's all habit. It's habitual. We become what we attend to, but we're not aware of what we're attending to because it's driven again and again by habit and routine. Even meditators who try to observe their stream of consciousness cannot trace or even recover the threads of thoughts and images as they weave and wander from one state to the next. It all just sort of goes in a bit. We're just caught up in this. It's very much like the Avatamsaka text. Each one does not know the other, like the stream moving on. The neuroscience conclusions, such as they are, suggest that we hang on to a self based on the way it feels, even though no self can be found or any entity that corresponds to a me having all these experiences. That I seem to be solid, autonomous individual consisting of a distinct mind and body that sets me apart from other individuals in the material world out there is a fiction. Now that's sort of my amateurish trying to go into, but I talked to colleagues in the field and they said, it's pretty good for a Buddhist. So my point here, what I concluded partly in this is one passage of this article. I said, this all sounds very Buddhist. The rejection of an inner self, the idea of the self as a conventional name given to a loosely held together bundle of elements called the five skandhas. Self, comforting and useful as it may be, refers to nothing real or lasting. And the self that experiences things is just a fleeting impression that arises and fades away like every other experience. And then I quote the Vajra Sutra, all conditioned phenomena, all conditioned things are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, like drops of dew and a flash of lightning. Contemplate them in this way. Do not contemplate them as not dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows, because then you will get tied up and continue in samsara. This is what the Buddha advised. So in this, everything is interdependent and causally conditioned. Liberation and wisdom comes from seeing things as they are and getting behind this grand illusion. So I just wanted to toss this out a little bit tonight to show that there are some interesting parallels between science, neuroscience in particular, and Buddhism. I am very reluctant to say they're identical, or even that they will be identical at some point. Some people are more optimistic or sanguine about this. Right now, where I'm at, I would say they're not absolutely congruent, although there's overlaps and interesting parallels. They may be seeing things differently, and they may be actually looking at different things. And more importantly, they're looking at different things through different eyes. And so the eye that is coming out of this text, the perceiving, observing, is called the Dharma eye. And that's not the same as the scientific eye. And let me just for the sake of just not going into great detail, the Dharma eye comes to focus and precision through ethical, moral grounding and almost polish. And when the ethical moral dimension of sensibility is at its highest stage, it then sees differently and sees different things and sees the universe and its workings in a very different fashion than is seen through the eye that is not grounded in ethical sensibility. So this is a different model. It's a very different model. You could say on the deep philosophical level, it's quite a different model. But I would say even on the pragmatic everyday level, you can see the results of this different model. Science might say, oh, well, if we can do it, we do it. If this can be done, why not? And so constant things are happening, evolving, without thoughts to the moral, ethical consciousness to humanity. It just doesn't have an ethical, necessary built-in ethical break. The ethical break, B-R-A-K-E, comes from blue ribbon committees that are appointed by advisory panels from the president long after the horse is out of the barn. And this was Oppenheimer. I don't know, I don't see the movies, but I guess there's a new movie about Oppenheimer. But Oppenheimer opined that, what have I unleashed here? Now, why didn't he opine about this before it was unleashed? No, seriously, we had a conference at the City of 10,000 Buddhas once, and we had 3 scientists there who were part of the Manhattan Project. I'm digressing some more. And we were talking about ethics and morals and the conditional world, and one of the scientists started crying. And my teacher said, why are you crying? He said, because I finally realized that when I entered and did this project, I left my morals and values like my shoes outside the door when I went into the lab. And now I should have left those on, and it might have been a totally different result. So this kind of difference is fundamental, not just on the philosophical level, but on the actual application. So I just don't want to beat this into the ground, but that's something that I'm thinking about. Maybe I'll tell a little story here, and then Jin Chuan, are you going to talk tonight? By your silence, I know you're consenting. Okay, just a little story along these lines, and then I want to go into this more next week, but I always try to tell a story from the bowing pilgrimage when Heng Sure and I were doing a bowing pilgrimage from Go-Wheel Temple in South Pasadena, Los Angeles, up to the City of 10,000 Buddhas. It was very slow because every 3 steps we would do a full bow along the highway. And so it took 2.5 years. So when people talk about putting in what's called the new train, the jet, what's that, high-speed rail. We were on the very, very low-speed rail. 2.5 years to get from that place to the city. Now it's, soon it'll be 2.5 minutes. On the other hand, if they wire you cybernetically, like Elon Musk is working on something to actually get that chip in your brain, you could probably go in a thought. Whose thought? His thought, which you'll pay for. Any event, sorry, I'm editorializing. So I was saying that we were bowing, and the different people would come out and talk. So this one time, someone stops, and a very kind of distinguished-looking gentleman gets out of his car and comes over, and he says, excuse me, I've been watching you here along the highway, and I was wondering, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're Buddhist monks, and we're making a bowing pilgrimage. And he said, who are you bowing to? I said, well, we're sort of not bowing to, we're bowing away. He says, what do you mean bowing away? I said, we're trying to empty out and bow away our bad habits and faults and, things that are not so wholesome in our persons. And it's each bow we try to repent of past karma and so forth. And he said, oh, it's really interesting. So I said, well, it's based on a Buddhist notion that if you want to, it's really for world peace, but the Buddhist notion would be world peace cannot happen without a peaceful mind. So if you want to change the world, first you have to change your heart and mind. And it says, therefore, the biggest things begin in the smallest of places. He said, oh, that's really interesting. I said, what do you do? He says, I do the biggest things. And I said, what? He said, I'm an astronomer from Cal Poly. Oh, and he says, so I'm not in the littlest places. I'm up there with our new telescope looking at the biggest places. And I said, wow, that's pretty incredible. And he says, yeah, it is incredible. Right now we can see to the edge of the universe. And I said, Now, I remember from my college astronomy course that the edge of the universe has been constantly moving. At one point, we thought the edge of the universe was like this ceiling. And the lights up here were the stars and the planets. It was just our ceiling. And at the center was the me and mine. The world, the earth, which is called geocentric. Like egocentric. Okay, get it? So everything revolved around me. It was like this theater. Then a couple of scientists discovered that, well, it wasn't just a ceiling, a celestial orb. It was going in multiple directions. And then they further discovered that the earth wasn't the center. Well, the sun was the center. So then the universe changed. Now, some of these people were accepted, and some of them were put in jail, and some were burned at the stake. You know, see, you got new ideas, what happens to you? Anyhow, so I said, and then once we started past Galileo and whatnot, I was just relating, I was trying to maybe show off a little that I knew something about astronomy, but it said it seemed to me from my astronomy course that the edge was always elusive, that when they got there, they had a stronger telescope and the edge moved. So I said, you know, to this day, I can't wrap my head around the edge or the what you call the end of the universe. Because at the end, wouldn't there be something else? I mean, my mind just can't think of, like you come to the top of the stairs, there's something else, right? You go to the edge of the cliff, there's still something else. To say that, I said, I can't wrap my mind around that. And then he said, well, what do the Buddhists say about that? I said, I'm not sure, but the Avatamsaka, the sutra we're using here, says there's no beginning or end. And he said, woo, I can't wrap my mind around that. And so he just stood there for a while. And then it was very interesting. He said, you know, he was thinking, maybe the problem isn't the sutra or my telescope. Maybe the problem is our mind. And he goes, maybe we're not so different, he said. You telescope out. We astronomers telescope out, and you Buddhists telescope in. And then he said, and maybe this mind that you're talking about is the real edge of the universe. Now, I don't know who this guy was, but it was pretty incredible that he moved in stages through connecting between a Buddhist and a scientist and just seeing. And I think maybe that's where sort of the cutting edge is going now. Based on what I presented here in the neuroscience, the Buddhist thing, when it says everything is made, fabricated from the mind, our whole experience is our mind working in these ways to set up what we think is there. But it's really just a projection of the mind. If that's the case, then the real science, so to speak, is not to observe that, but to observe this while it's observing that. If you get where I'm going. In other words, understanding this, the observer, is where the attention and the research should be going, which is what you do with self-cultivation and meditation, rather than constantly just looking at that. Because there's an early text, it said something very, very interesting. It says, what everyone wants to know is that, the nature, reality, the big picture. Then the second line of that verse says, but our means of knowing that is this, the individual. Then the third line asks the postmodern question, how can you possibly know that? And the fourth line says, only by cultivating and refining this. So it's a very interesting, and this is early, this is like before the Common Era philosopher reflecting on what we know comes through this. And therefore, this is the most important thing to study, not that. Because that is filtered, projected, and woven into this. So in a sense, what this text is maybe talking about is using the mind when it says they do not know each other and so on and so forth, using the mind as a mirror rather than as a sponge. When the mind is used as a sponge, then wisdom turns into consciousness, becomes ordinary consciousness, because it's linking to the sense organs, the sense faculties, and so forth, and setting up that. When it simply observes and reflects, then consciousness becomes wisdom. I'll maybe talk about this a little more next week, because there's other texts that go into this. But I wanted to bring up this discussion of the intersection between modern science and Buddhism, and maybe put some cautionary thoughts out there that I don't think they're absolutely identical, but it's an interesting way of looking at each other comparatively. Anyhow, I'll stop there. Jinchuan, if you don't want to talk, don't sit in the back. We used to do that with a teacher. We hated talking. We just thought, God, talking after the teacher's really hard. So we sort of sit in the back, and of course, that's whoever got called. Anybody sitting in the front. The one time I sat in the front because I thought, oh, I want to talk. I have some good ideas. Totally ignored me. And called people from the back who were trying to hide. So I don't say you were doing that, but. You want mine? No, here, take mine. Yeah. I don't have COVID, you'll be okay. Now I can't think, my brain.
This camera? Okay. So as Marty was talking about the kind of neuroscience, I just say one little bit and then kind of shift. But I remember actually watching this TED talk about neuroscience and how we perceive. And there was a couple lines in that really stuck with me. He said, hallucination is, I think, uncontrolled perception. And he said, perception is controlled hallucination. And then he proves it, which is amazing. He kind of shows all these kind of tricks that our mind does. For instance, he has like a grid, if you can imagine like a checkerboard, and like black and white, and then there's like a little cylinder on it, and it looks like it's casting a shadow. And so when you look at it, it looks like certain squares are like a different color. And so he says, actually, they're exactly the same color, but it looks very different when you look at this picture. And so he pulls another, like just one strip of like gray across the screen, and he puts it next to the two boxes, and you see they're exactly the same color. Then he moves it away, and again, it looks different. It's like, it just shows you that our mind is actually just playing tricks. And then another one he did was around a sound file. It's like, and it's like, can you understand? No one can understand it. So then he actually plays the actual meaning of what that clip is. Then he plays it again. And then you can hear exactly what it's saying, because now your mind already anticipates what you're going to hear. And once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. You now know what it's going to say. Also very interesting. But the one that really blew me away was that actually the body that we think we're in is also a hallucination of our mind. So he has an experiment where somebody has his arm out, and he has another kind of rubber arm in front of them too. I don't know if people have seen this experiment. Yeah. And it's just, but if you think about the implications of it, it's pretty crazy. And they just pull like a brush on the two hands, like the rubber arm in your hand, and you're just doing that. And so you feel, because your hand's like a little bit hidden, the rubber arm's in front of you. And because you feel the same thing, your mind thinks that's your arm. And so in this kind of fun little video, somebody comes with like a fork. It's going to stabs that arm. And the guy jumps back, out of fear because he's thinking that his hand's going to get stabbed. And it's like, wow, you mean this body that I am in is something that I project with my mind? Huh. Does that mean I have some fluidity on where I place those boundaries? It's kind of interesting. And if you imagine all the contemplations the Buddha gives on the body and the elements and these things, it starts to break down those very hard lines of inner, outer kind of dichotomies that we kind of almost take for granted as the way things are. So anyways, those are kind of some interesting reflections from watching. You find this by Anil Seth. I forgot what this actually the title of the TED Talk, but I remember the person was Anil Seth. Lots of views on YouTube. But what I actually wanted to share was still on that theme, which was I found another teaching in Yogacara very helpful for kind of reflecting on experience and not thinking that what I see is so solid. And I don't know if people know Yogacara, but they say there's 3 transformations that our mind makes that basically obscures what's actually going on. And this happens every single moment. So people know there's the 6 consciousnesses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So our 6 consciousnesses are only perceiving a certain, you could say, range of experience. Like our eyes don't see all the different wavelengths of light, very narrow. Same thing for our ears, right? Same thing for our body. We're not touching everything. So immediately you can see, just through our senses, it's a very limited perception. And then in the Yogacara, there's the 7th consciousness, which they say where our ego, our self resides. So then we actually take all that data and we interpret it through a self. So not all the data coming in really matters to me. So I just kind of, don't relate to them. And so I just pay attention to what really matters to me, and that's the self, right? Limits that experience again. And the 8th consciousness, if people know, is where we hold all our memories, the storehouse consciousness. And so those memories and our past experiences inform that experience, like what Marty was just talking about before. This kind of memory patterning kind of comes together to form our current experience. Now, this is very useful, I found, as a reflection, because sometimes I become very hard in my point of view of something. I think I'm right in some way. But just from that reflection, it's pretty clear that for sure, whatever I'm thinking is actually completely diluted, at least at 3 levels. And I thought one just very simple story just happened very recently, as an example, where I think I made a kind of a quick assumption, kind of misperceiving. So in the monastery, we kind of, every day we set up for lunch and do things. And it's a little bit of a personal story. I don't know if it's okay if I tell it, but it's more embarrassing for me than him. So, so if people know, Yunden's been in the monastery for 3 months now. Actually, he's just finished. Tomorrow's his graduation. He's going to be giving a speech at lunch if people want to come for our day-long meditation. You can come for our lunch and hear him share about his 3-month experience. But just a few days ago, usually we all set up kind of for, often helping out for setting up for lunch. And I came down a little bit late, and I saw Xingliang Shi, which is our novice here, kind of finishing with setting up for lunch. And I thought, oh, where's Yuan Lin? Because, he's kind of layman helping out in the monastery. I thought, it'd be good if he's helping out. So then I come looking for him, and I find he's meditating in the hall. I thought, it'd be good if you kind of helped out. He didn't really say anything. He said, okay. He kind of looked at me, okay, yeah. And so later he was talking about, actually he had checked with Xingliang Shi before at 10:30 to see if he needed any help, but he didn't need any help, so why should he went to meditate? And I realized in my mind, I had kind of already created a story that, he's just kind of meditating, letting Xingliang Shi, do the work, and actually he's really supposed to be working and helping out in the monastery, And I realized that small misperception can create actually a lot of tension if, in a kind of a regular relationship, we can kind of take these little tiny misunderstandings and create a lot of resentment, and we can get into like ill will and get into like division, which then get into like parties and get into like, breaking apart, right? Just because of some misperception and thinking that my view is right versus saying actually what we see is not so correct. And so anyway, so that's just kind of one, I think, very simple story around, just everyday life. Oftentimes we see something, and I find actually it's much more skillful to actually check, like, am I actually perceiving this correctly? And then also checking, is my mind kind of fabricating a story on top of that that's not really going on? Because oftentimes that's what's happening. So, Mike.
Well, no, it reminds me of another good story. This is this is inspirational. So the story of the you get into a mindset, or what Jin Chuan was just describing, and then from that mindset, everything is aligned. So you expect this, and then you read this, and so forth, without realizing that you're actually projecting, not reflecting. So this guy who wanted to buy a hot new Lamborghini, and it saved his money, but he was ecologically conscious, and he knew that this was a gas hog, and it was really conspicuous consumption and all these bad things. And so in his mind, he was just morally riven with second thoughts about this, but he really wanted the Lamborghini. And so he got the Lamborghini, and he's going down this mountain road, vroom, 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 and he's very self-conscious. And he comes around a place, and there's a woman at the side of the road, and she looks up and she says, "Pig!" And he goes, "Oh, damn it, she's calling me a pig, a consuming pig, and ruining the environment and everything." He gets really pissed off at being insulted in this way. It's what he thought would happen, but here it happened. He couldn't avoid it. And so he says, "Oh, the hell with her, I'm just going to drive." And he slips into gear and goes around the corner and smashes into a big pig and crashes a car. So what he saw was an insult to his consumption pattern, was actually a warning to say there's a pig ahead, slow down. Anyhow, we have some announcement. One announcement, we have a new PhD candidate. Oh, you finished. Have you defended?
Finished.
And you defended successfully?
Yeah.
Whoa. Hey. Could you tell us what your thesis was and how just a little bit about the defense? How much did you have to pay the committee to get? No, I'm. Go ahead. Is there an extra
Well, yeah,
mic?
just here. Just make the handheld. Let me turn on.
He's gone from ABD to D, right? Done. Almost. All but dissertation.
Is
Yeah.
this the D for done or for dead?
Yeah, all but dead. Okay, keep going.
So,
Got to turn it on. I don't think it's on.
is it on?
No, it's on.
Okay. Okay.
What was
Sorry,
the
just
title of your dissertation?
Collecting my thoughts. Yeah, I don't fully remember. I had 3 options earlier this week. It's something to the effect of thinking through texts, the practice and culture of Sui Tang Buddhist scholasticism. So Sui and Tang being 2 dynasties in China, 581 to 618, and then 618 to 907. It's roughly, the early kind of Middle Ages, if you think European terms.
Weren't you using one of the major commentators of the Avatamsaka Sutra, considered the Avatamsaka patriarch, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. My one of the main texts that I worked with was Master Chengguan, Qingyang Guoshe, who wrote a commentary on the Avatamsaka Sutra, and then people thought it wasn't clear enough, so he wrote a line-by-line sub-commentary in his own text. So what I did or attempted to do in my dissertation was really kind of look at that literature again, kind of subverting some of the scholarly assumptions that have grown up around them, because people have come to approach them very much as kind of philosophers in a modern sense, like, oh, these are trying to come up with a with a system of, as Marty was saying in the beginning, like of truths that are like it's this way and not that way, and instead I argue that what they're doing is much more pedagogical. They're engaging with their students, teaching them ways of understanding the texts, understanding the world, cultivating the person, engaging texts existentially, and also in a very playful way. That the texts, one of the metaphors I play with in the dissertation is seeing exegesis as a form of art, and then I bring in the example of music and how we're very kind of, attuned to seeing patterns in the world, and then kind of variation on patterns. So if you hear different versions of the same jazz standards, you get like, and there's something different, something very similar going on when you read commentaries, and like you can kind of attune to that. So there's an element of play where, as an audience to the commentaries, you kind of get initiated into this play and then start slowly kind of seeing the world according,
This
inspired in that
Feta.
way.
He didn't introduce him, but that's his name, Feta. But along those lines, he just gave an interesting talk basing that kind of elastic and creative commentary to jazz, to modern jazz, and you took 5 variations of a standard jazz piece, and you could see the theme, the underlying melody was there, but each time it shifted and changed. And the thing I like about what you're doing is to show that all along this is a very living, alive, elastic tradition, and it's not fixed in stone. So it's really, quite interesting.
Like one of my favorite moments in the early parts of Chungwan's sub-commentary and his own commentary, he's giving interpretations of these kind of poetic verses about the Avatamsaka, which he wrote himself. So he wrote these poetic verses on the Avatamsaka, and then he's writing a sub-commentary interpreting what he said, what he wrote 20 years earlier. And now you get sometimes when they're interpreting a sutra, they go, oh, you could interpret it this way or this way. And there are 2 different ways. And you're like, oh, I guess they're not sure. But Master Chungwan, commenting on the line he wrote himself 20 years earlier, goes, you could interpret it this way, or in this way. And you're like, well, they're like very different ways of reading the same, like which one is correct? He's like, no, they're both great ways of reading the same, the same line that I myself wrote, and you can interpret it either way. It's like almost like, can you think of a third? It'd be great.
This is great. Anyhow, congratulations.
Thank you. So you didn't know you came tonight to a jazz concert, Dharma Jazz. So we have a couple announcements. So first, tomorrow we have a kind of day-long meditation if people want to come. We'll have the morning be on the kind of introducing meditation, but especially looking at kindness in our communication. So that'll be in the morning. And then in the afternoon we'll have basically an afternoon of sitting, finishing at 3:30. Sunday we have a talk by Bogdan, can never say his last name, it's Polish, who's
Our Polish monk is in here. So
our Polish monk is in quarantine still. But he builds quantum computers and is kind of a follow-up from his last talk. And it's going to be on Zoom, so or you can probably also watch on YouTube. And so if you want to, look at the berkeleymonastery.org website, and you can find a link to go register. It's from, I think, 10 to 11:30-ish tomorrow. And Doug Powers will also be sharing. And if you want to really see how our mind works in quantum levels and not understand what's going on, Sunday. Sorry, Sunday. So tomorrow is the meditation. Sunday is the quantum physics. And then...
maybe tomorrow's quantum.
Yeah.
As you meditate.
As you meditate, yeah. And then the other things, we have a number of retreats coming up. And so if people wish to attend the upcoming Suna Center retreat, definitely want to sign up sooner rather than later. I think the theme is actually around really looking at our hearts and kind of healing and bringing together, again, this Buddhist philosophy of mind, Yogacara, with kind of psychodynamic theory, looking at some of the ways that the West also has very sophisticated ways of understanding how we grow up, how we create these patterns of perception, and how can we shift those from, say, like envy, jealousy, kind of greed, to say gratitude and joy. And so it's really interesting. I think it'll be a very meaningful retreat if people have a chance. And it's kind of also addressed a little bit like mental health and community life that I think is going to be quite fascinating. Marty will also be attending, and also Dharma Monk Heng Sure, I heard, might also be able to attend in person. So definitely, Doug will be anchoring. He'll be there for sure. And we have a chance to also learn from our 3 senior teachers, so that's definitely precious. After that, we have, I think, Buddha Root Farm coming up later in end of June, and then Guanyin session end of July. So people want to attend?
Buddha Root Farm is up in the woods in Oregon.
Yeah, Wood in Oregon. So people want to join that. It's a chance to kind of unplug and plug into compassion. Namo Guan Shin Pusa. Doug Powers and Reverend Heng Sure will both be there for that. Okay.
Ken, class here?
Then get a mic. Feder, can you pass her the mic? No, but you need it. You have to be loud enough to transmit onto the internet.
Next Friday is the last Friday night class for Marty, because we'll go into summer break because we have all these retreats that
Yeah.
we'll be attending.
Yeah.
That's it.
So if you want to see us, come join the retreats. Okay. Dedicate merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the 3 jewels.